Our oldest, Carl, was the eighth baby born that particular day in the Clarion Hospital. Now, mind you, it was the old Clarion Hospital, the one over on 7th Avenue. And having experienced two other births in another hospital, I can look back and say it was a pretty primitive experience. We got there late in the afternoon. We almost could have walked, but we didn't. We found, once we got there, that there was no room in the inn. Imagine that. It seemed that there was only one pre-delivery room, and it was filled, and so we began the journey in the hallway. Eventually, we got into the pre-delivery room, only to find that it was a room shared by three other women, also in labor, with nothing more than those hospital curtains separating one from the other. The nurses were operating like air traffic controllers at O'Hare Airport, trying to negotiate for women in labor so as not to get two of them at the same point of ready to deliver, because you see there was only one delivery room as well. And so there was a lot of timing. Have you ever been in a confined space with four women in hard labor? It is not a pretty picture. There is a great deal of pain and yelling and bargaining and coaches prompting, breathing, counting. There is negotiating with nurses. These were all, if I remember correctly, first-time mothers. So there was a heightened sense of anxiety. Nobody really knew exactly what was coming, or that what they were experiencing was normal. It was scary. Being the last of the 8 to be born meant that the other 3 went first. There was almost a sense of relief in that, because there was, well, should I say peace? Even though Deborah was still in hard labor and getting harder by the moment, there were still those moments between contractions where one could actually breathe and take in the experience. And isn't that what brings us here tonight? We're looking for peace in the midst of a world of contractions. And oh, what a world. It's been contracting for years. It started off a number of years ago when we got into that whole political contracting, where we couldn't talk civilly about politics with one another without labeling each other, or eventually not talking to each other at all. And then came the racial contractions, where we tried to figure out whose life really mattered. And then on top of it all were the COVID contractions. Do we shut down? Do we social distance? Do we isolate? Do we quarantine? Do we mask? Do we vax? And on it went. And while much of that is behind us, there's still the anxiety and the long COVID and the other after effects. And now we find ourselves in economic contractions, due partially to COVID, Inflation is eating more and more of our paychecks that aren't really going up very fast, not as fast as the rest of the cost. We watch our pensions do yo-yos, our investments just go crazy. It's like a roller coaster. We wonder about the future. It seems almost anything these days is a matter of contracting. The wrong word, the wrong look can mean an end of friendships, anger, frustration, violence even. Yes, we come this night for a bit of peace in the midst of this contracting world. We come to hear the story. It's somewhat ironic that it's a birth story, which means birth pangs, contractions. Oh, we don't hear about those because men wrote the story. But if Jesus is truly human, Mary went through that. But unlike most of the contractions today, we get to see the child. And oh, what a child. Heralded by angels, greeted by shepherds. A child is born to us. A son is given. And he shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. It is in that child, in the midst of the birth pangs of this world, in the midst of the contractions, that we dare to have hope. It is because of that child's life, death, and resurrection that we too are called children of God. Reminded in baptism that God has called us his own, birthed us, if you would. And it is as he gathers us at table to receive that spiritual milk of the body and blood of Christ, Holy Communion, that we are nourished in the midst of our weariness in this contracting world. And then we come to that moment we have all gathered for, when the lights are turned down, the candles lit, and we gather with the world to sing Silent Night, a prayer for peace in the midst of our contracting world, amidst of hope, but really peace. But it is such fleeting peace, that silent night. We will soon return to our contracting worlds. But there is good news, that because of that child, we dare hope. Where that child continues to be born. It is even in the midst of our contracting worlds, in the midst of those birth pangs, in the midst of our daily lives, in the midst of our, labor, that he will greet us. In those crazy moments that we cannot explain, that pass all understanding, he comes to us again, bringing with him peace and joy. in the midst of this crazy and contracting world. You see, they are but birth pangs. God is birthing something. We don't always know what. But we have seen the child. And he comes again. Emmanuel, God with us.